Yep, we're now live, Chair.
Okay, right. Good evening, all. Sorry about that. My apologies for the delay. First of all, have we got any apologies for absence or substitutions?
You're on mute, Diane.
Substitutions or apologies? No.
Yes, we do have apologies.
Yeah.
Right.
Technical issues. We're on mute. I do apologise.
Yes.
Right. Councillor Hutchinson substituting for Councillor B. Smith, and have apologies from Councillor B. Smith.
Okay, thank you. Any members' interest or pecuniary or the...
Hello, guys.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thanks. Yeah. Members' interest, nothing to declare? No. Can I just say, before we start, just need the board's approval on this. I'd like to move, if possible, item 6, the Ombudsman's report, to in front of item what was 4, major capital projects. Is everybody okay with that? All
yeah,
right.
all right, Chair.
All right. Thanks very much indeed. Right. Okay. Well, we'll start with the Ombudsman complaints. Who's leading this, please? Is it Sarah or is it Derek?
Sorry, Chair. You've not admissions of the public or minutes.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, need a minute. My apologies. Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, I haven't got that in front of me. Can we have a look? Anyone got any want to approve or recommend the minutes from last meeting, please?
Yeah, happy to approve them, Chair.
Just a second, please. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, everybody. Sorry about that. Okay, so can we start now? Thank you. If we go on to the Ombudsman's complaint, is it Sarah or Derek leading this?
It's myself, Chair. Derek might jump in at some point, but he is currently connecting on slightly technical issues, so I'll cover it if that's okay.
I know he feels. Can I just do this? This is about, everyone's read the report. This is more about process for future, and rather than a inquiry as to what's gone wrong previously, I think, because there are some recommendations here how to avoid this. So I say you can go as much detail as you want, but just for the panel's point of view, we're looking at how to avoid this happening again rather than examining what's happened in the past. Thank you very much.
So.
Thank you.
So it was brought to our attention by one complainant, but it is around process. The report that's been circulated highlights the steps that we're taking going forward in order to avoid similar actions happening again. And if you look at Appendix 2 of the report, it gives you our action plan on the steps that we are taking, some of which you can see we have completed, the particular complainant issues, but also looking at future processes and the piece of work that we're doing around automating work, so it's not reliant on officers or individuals where things can slip. It's an automated process which we are working towards, and we have done some work already in terms of the online reporting for other areas like fly tipping, it has been successful, and we're looking at rolling that across all of the volume environmental nuisance work. So it's a long piece of work, but that is where we're aiming to go. The point of bringing this to committee tonight is because it has to be presented to a body of council members as part of the Ombudsman requirement. So you've seen the report. I don't want to go into thread to needle with everything on it. If you've got any questions for me, I'm happy to answer. And like I say, maybe that Derek jumps in at some point with some more information. But thank you, Chair.
Well, yeah, thank you, Sarah. I think the report's self-explanatory, as you say. So really, it's a case of comments from the board, really, your observations or what you think, and any recommendations for the future. Although most of them are in here already. So I'll throw it open if that's all right. No takers? Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, it is very self-explanatory, is this report. I think the thing is really just to ensure that it doesn't happen again, and we've actually learnt from this mistake. And at the end of the day, somebody is always accountable for things not actually happening. And it's ensuring that, and I think one of the processes, and it's a process that I've actually seen up in our CCTV room, that there's actually a list of what, just as an example, what jobs the wardens are actually doing, and that list's there so everybody can actually see it as well. So if obviously something doesn't get done, then other people can see that that doesn't actually get done. And I think that's something maybe, I don't know whether we need to look at in the future, or something that's already in place that, you know, there's basically a tick box and accountability for who's doing what, when they're doing it, when it's coming in. And if something gets missed out of that tick box, at least somebody else can see it, whether it's you know, a manager or somebody else within the team. They can go back to that person and say, hey, I think you may have forgot something. Are you dealing with this? And I suppose that in place will ensure that things don't get missed in future.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair.
Colin.
Thanks, Chair. I was wondering what arrangements are going to be in place for reporting noise complaints for people who don't have online access, because we can't be moving to an entirely online process for this.
Yeah, if I can come in on that one then. So
Yeah,
we're going to continue with the contact centre. It's just making it more available online for people to report electronically if they wish. And it will also be that when they ring into the contact centre, they'll fill in the online form for the reportee. So it still goes through the same process. So there's no making it difficult for anybody that hasn't got computer access. They can still access through the same means that they do already.
Okay, thanks. And is it all right if I also just ask how many noise complaints are open at present, given that there was such a backlog, and the length of time from the initial complaint to officer assessment at the moment?
So just to give you some reassurance, although the jobs are classed as open, it doesn't mean that nothing's happened with them. It may be that we're waiting for some information. So one of the things that I mentioned before about the automated response is we ask for people to fill in noise logs so that the jobs will remain open while we await that information. It might be that we never get any noise logs returned, but the job remains open. So the idea is that the automated response will remind the individual that we're waiting for some information from them. So at the moment, we have 272 open noise jobs, which sounds like a lot. But again, it might be that we're waiting for information. It might be that there's a large number of complainants about one particular job that we're looking into and there's a long investigation for that. Or it might be just that we've kept it open because it might happen again. Although we've dealt with the issue, it might happen again, so we've just kept that open.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Audrey.
Yeah, I suppose it's just that since I've been a counsellor, I have had quite a lot of complaints about noise, especially in flats. And sometimes there's a bit of a difficulty where one tenant is a together housing tenant and they report the noise complaint there and somebody else reports it to the council. And I think, have you got a process of working together with together housing? Is there some sort of process in place? Because I have to be honest, it doesn't seem to be very substantial from my experience. And then just secondly, I think when people complain, it is a last resort, and I really do think we have to take this quite seriously, because when people actually get on that phone, it's usually because they're at the end of their tether, and I think we really have to make sure that we are listening to people.
Just for bring Stephanie, that's a point actually. If this problem is a together housing, well, not saying this one is, but if it happens with together, who's responsible first? Is it together housing should resolve it, and then it comes to the council, or are they responsible to sort it out themselves?
As I understand it, Derek may correct me, because environmental health falls under our remit, the council has a responsibility, although together housing would be expected to look into it as the landlord, but under an environmental health perspective, it's the council's responsibility. So they could be tackling it from two sides. We do have a good relationship with together housing. I can see that Derek's raised his hand, so I'll let him jump in on that one.
Thank you, Sarah. Can everybody hear me, please? Because I've got some connectivity issues. Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
I think Councillor Smith raises a really good point. There is a thin line between antisocial behaviour and noise. So if you think about the environmental health duty, it is to look at a statutory noise nuisance. And some members will know, because I've had conversations with them, a statutory nuisance is an incredibly high threshold. So you could be suffering quite a lot of distress and alarm from noise, but it never reaches the level that an abatement notice can be served because it's classed as a statutory nuisance. So that's where it then comes into the antisocial behaviour field. And as we know, noise is often associated by behaviour elsewhere. Could be from parties, it could be from people constantly going to and from a property. So what we do is we share with Together Housing and the police on a daily basis through our ASB approach all the reports that are made, and many of those reports are actually antisocial behaviour that relate to noise. So what we do is we often deal with noise because it's been reported as antisocial behaviour rather than as noise nuisance. And I think it's a really difficult line. So if you're dealing with a noise that's coming from a factory, quite often that will come into environmental health and it'll be looked as a statutory noise nuisance. If it's noise from neighbours, more often than not, it comes into antisocial behaviour world. And the beauty about the systems that Sarah's been talking about is all these systems are gradually joining up. So at the moment, we actually share lists between the police, Together Housing and ourselves. Moving forward, that'll come into the council and it'll be put on our one system. So I think it's similar to the presentation we did around fly tipping, where we know we've got vulnerabilities around reporting, but just to reassure everybody that we look at noise through two lenses. We look at it through a statutory noise nuisance, which very rarely actually reach the threshold when you talk about residential noise. And then we look at it through the lens of antisocial behaviour, where we think about somebody's conduct and behaviour. And that's based on amenity, loss of amenity, rather than a high level, which is around health implications. Our new website, which will go live alongside the online reporting, will actually make this a lot clearer, because at the moment, if you go into reporting noise, it talks all about statutory noise nuisance, whereas moving forward, we'll be talking about statutory noise nuisance and antisocial behaviour, and the two levels are different. So I hope that makes sense, but it's basically saying we look at the harm. We don't particularly look at the thresholds. We look at what is the experience of the individual. And the case that Sarah mentions is a really good point, is these cases haven't been actioned. We've left them open and we've issued noise logs. And what's happened is a lot of logs haven't come back due to COVID.
Thanks, Jerry. Stephanie, do you want to say something? Oh, your hand is up, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Statutory noise level, although a noise may well be below the noise, the statutory noise level to have a noise abatement order, could it be the length of time that noise is heard? You know, if it's constant, really long-term noise and it's just constantly going on and on and on, would that sort of contribute towards a noise abatement order?
It can do, Councillor Clark. It is incredibly complex, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at the experience of the individual rather than, how shall I say it, the actually statutory noise nuisance. It's very easy where you've got decibel reading, and you've got a decibel reading, and you can point to a technical equation that says that's a statutory noise nuisance. As you quite rightly know, because I think we are dealing with a case in your ward, is when you deal with people who are, noise is very subjective, and I could play a noise tonight that maybe 5 people in this room could hear and 5 others couldn't. That is when it becomes incredibly complex, and that's where we have to look at wider issues. So you're absolutely right. The frequency and the persistence of noise can take it into a statutory noise nuisance, because when I say threshold, it wasn't a threshold basically just on decibel points. It was on actually hitting a number of triggers within the noise complaint, as you quite rightly know from a case you're involved with. So it's incredibly complex. But this case, in terms of the Ombudsman, the concern here is that we didn't keep the complainant updated. And I think that is the issue that the Ombudsman is concerned about, or she's concerned about. And also the fact that we've got a number of open cases. But I do want to say that we are dealing with unprecedented levels of reporting, as we identified through fly tipping only 6 weeks ago.
Can
you, Derek.
I just come in on back in on that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Derek. Yes, I'm well aware that it's complex. But one thing I must say about the report, and which I'm really glad about, and that is that the business support team will be dedicated to you. I think business support pick up an awful lot more of what is going on than people realise, even though they're not specialists in anything. They are specialists in keeping a department running smoothly. So I'm really glad that you now have a dedicated business support team.
Thank you. Audrey, is that an old hand or is it a new one? A wave.
It's a new one.
Okay.
But I just wanted to ask about feedback. You've got 200 odd cases that are open. How are you sort of recording? You know, you may think that you've got them open for the reason of adding more material, or you think it might come back to, you know, being a raised issue. How is the person getting notified? How are you keeping in touch now to make sure that it doesn't happen again, that they're left, you know, you think it's still ongoing because they haven't done such and such? Are people following things up? And
absolutely. As a result of this, we've introduced some more management checks in it. So all the jobs are highlighted to different parts of the team and different officers, and then their managers are doing some spot checks to make sure that anything that's in their queue, if you like, has been actioned and there's nothing left behind, so that there is that extra checks on things to make sure that we aren't missing things, and we're not going to have the same situation again where we've got people in our communities that are trying to get information from us and not getting any answers. So they're all getting informed as and when there's anything to update on, or if there's nothing to update on, they're getting told that we are still looking into it or that we're waiting for information.
Thank you, Sarah. Paul, is that a new hand you got up? Thank you.
It is, Chair, yeah. With regards to these figures that's in at the moment, it says about 271, did you say, Sarah, that was open at the moment?
272, yeah.
272. How do those numbers compare to previous years? Is that higher than usual? Is it because people...
I don't have that information on me at the moment.
Right, because obviously people's resilience...
I know that it was higher during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, that's it. People's tolerance levels have obviously changed whilst being at home a lot as well during that time. And if it is a case that those figures are high, a lot higher than usual, well, could it be a case that our, you know, the workload is too much for the resources that we've got, and that might be one of the reasons why this has sort of like slipped through? Is that something worth looking at?
I think I'll let Derek come in on that one. But like I say, I do know that it did increase during the pandemic when people were at home and experiencing more of the particularly noise complaints while they were in their homes.
Can I deal with that, Derek?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think we said this at the fly tipping scrutiny, like I say, 4 or 6 weeks ago, is that we called it the doorstop syndrome, where I think that people are now having to live and work more at home, and I think they're more aware of what's happening around them. And as I said, that's an opportunity because it gets communities involved, it raises expectations, and why shouldn't we have high expectations about Calderdale as a place? But it has led, I'm afraid, to unprecedented levels of reporting. So we can provide the data to you around noise because it all comes into one area, but we've seen increase in antisocial behaviour, increase in noise, increase in nuisance associated with dogs and ownership of dogs, because obviously I think everybody's aware that ownership of dogs increased during the COVID period, and we've seen increase around fly tipping. So environmental nuisance and antisocial behaviour has significantly increased. Obviously, it's not my place to talk about resources. Yes, it does put pressure on the resources we've got, but I do have to say that the processes we're introducing will add efficiency and effectiveness. And going back to the point made by Councillor Smith, the automated message is so important, because that will trigger a response from both the officer and the complainant if we've not had any information from them. So I believe, Sarah, it's within 14 days, the complainant will be asked, please, can we just remind you to submit your noise logs or contact us? And the officer will also get a automated message in 21 days time saying there's been no update on this case, can you please check the complainants? So we've taken all this learning, and I'm afraid it's taken us a little bit longer to get the system in place, but just like the fly tipping, if anybody's used the fly tipping app, this is going to work on the same basis. Reporting persons will be able to go on and see what's happening. But yes, it's not for me to decide on resources. We will, whatever we've got, we will use as efficiently and effectively as we can.
Thank you, Derek. We don't want to go there right away about resources this evening, but thanks anyway for that.
Chair, can I just ask, is there any chance we can have those figures, those comparables over the years, just to see how we are doing actually within the borough?
If I can just jump in there, sorry, whilst we've been talking, I've just had a look, and in 2021, there was a total of 1,851 noise jobs entered on our system. The same period in 2020, there was 426. So it shows the massive rise.
Okay. It occurs to me, I mean, I can't speak for the scrutiny committees, but I've never seen an ombudsman complaint come to this committee ever. I've been on it about 8 years. Is this because this is particularly persistent of complainants, or is it particularly bad case? Just do we know why this one's come and others haven't? Is it persistent?
Chair, when a decision is made by the local government ombudsman, if they feel that there is a system issue, then they actually identify what they would want. So we've instructed to do certain things, and it's within the report, and one of them was to take them to a body of councillors, and we discussed this with the portfolio holder, and we thought that this was the best process, so that you as members can be reassured that we have reacted to this poor experience. We have put systems in place, but you still may want us to do more. So I see Mike's got his hand up, and Mike probably knows more about the processes than I do, but that was the reason why it was a specific request from the local government ombudsman.
Mike?
It doesn't happen very often, Chair, but I think it has happened before, and I haven't looked it up, but from recollection, there was a general complaints report about complaints over the year, and we included a paragraph. We included a paragraph in that about, or a few paragraphs in about a similar ombudsman's report. So it doesn't happen very often, but it has happened before.
Right, okay, thanks for that. Everybody happy with that? Well, not happy with it. Have you all had our fill of what we want to say? Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Sarah. Thanks, Derek. You know, it's a good report. It's a bit worrying that we've been in this position, but, you know, there are mitigating circumstances. So let's just try not to let it get there again. I think should we leave it at that? Okay, thanks, everybody. Can we move on to the next item, please, which is capital programme. Capital programme. I think that's Rob, is it?
That's right, Chair.
Yeah, we have actually, I think, I believe everyone's read this report in detail. So if you just give us a brief intro, we'll just take questions if that's all right. Is that okay with you?
That's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Say what you need to say by all means. But I mean, you know, we've all read it, so just feel what you need important to say. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair. I've got some slides, so if it's okay with you, I'll project them onto the screen. Is that all right?
That's fine. Yeah, fine with me. Yeah.
Just let me know when you can see that, Chair.
Yeah, I can see it all right. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So thanks for inviting me today, Chair. For those who don't know me, my name's Robert Summerfield. I'm the Kent Council's corporate lead for major projects. So today it's just really going to be a brief overview of the capital programme that's administered through major projects and other services. What I've tried to do in the presentation is describe some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment. Some of them are quite topical, and particularly some which have just materialised over the last 2 years as well, since the pandemic began. It's quite a high-level presentation, but hopefully it might just whet your appetite and give you the requisite information for further visits to Scrutiny. More than happy to come back and allow members to scrutinise individual specific projects if required. Yeah, hopefully this presentation is going to allow you to identify sort of specific areas for scrutiny, and obviously I'll be happy to answer any specific questions that you have as well. With your permission, Chair, I think if you don't mind, I'll circulate a full list of the projects which are currently ongoing within the capital programme. And they're at different stages of the project life cycle. Some you'll be familiar with from the reports that you get from our head of finance, Nigel Broadbent. Others are in development and you may not have seen them before. So that might provide you with the additional information to identify specific projects that you may wish to scrutinise individually in the future. Through you, Chair, if I just run through this presentation very quick, I'm happy to take questions at the end.
Thank you.
So first slide here then, this is just some images really just to give you an idea of some of the projects that are ongoing at the moment. The bottom right is the new special educational needs block that we've been delivering through the schools capital programme up at Ryburn, and on the bottom right there is a new, and again another new SEN provision at London Foot at Woodbank that we've just recently opened. You'll see at the top left the Trinity sixth form, which was opened in September of last year. That's just recently got an outstanding Ofsted inspection in all areas since its opening, so we're very proud of that. You'll see in the middle there the commercial block, which is currently being redeveloped at the moment, and at the top right is just one of the programme teams who are delivering the capital programme. That's the South East Calderdale programme team. So in terms of investment programmes, there's a number of investment programmes that are currently ongoing within the council at the moment, and the majority of capital projects are assigned obviously to these capital programmes. Within major projects, we operate what's called a P3M methodology. That stands for Portfolio, Programme and Project Management Maturity model. So basically that just means that we organise our projects into programmes and manage them under the Managing Successful Programmes methodology outlined by government, and the programmes come under a portfolio, and then we manage these under the sort of Prince2 principles that many of you have come across over the years. The portfolio itself, you'll probably be familiar with from much of the communications that we do. That's called Calderdale Next Chapter. So on this diagram, the programmes in red are those that are currently delivered through my service in major projects, those being West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund, Halifax Town Centre Delivery Plan, South East Calderdale Master Plan, and the Schools Capital and Maintenance. We'll shortly be taking responsibility for the ones in green. They've been developed at the moment to a delivery stage through the Economy, Housing and Investment Directorate, and they'll move into major projects for implementation. And these obviously are the Future High Street Fund that you'll have seen in Halifax and Elland, the Town Deal in Todmorden and Brighouse, and the Heritage Action Zone, which is happening in Sorby Bridge. The Transforming Cities Fund that you can see there in the orange is basically an element of funding that we use to fund other schemes. So that contributes to the funding strategy for the Halifax Station Gateway project, which I'm sure many of you will have seen in the media recently, and that's being implemented actually through the Transport Fund programme. The funding is also used to deliver other initiatives outside of major projects through the Strategic Infrastructure Service, and that's managed by Stephen Lee. The programmes in white are also delivered through Regeneration and Strategy Directorate, either through Strategic Infrastructure, again under Stephen Lee, or through the Housing Service, which now comes under our new Assistant Director, Kate McNicholas. In total, the capital portfolio over the next 5 years totals about £500 million, so it's quite large for an authority of our size. Those members who were present at the Strategy and Performance Scrutiny Committee last night will be aware that this number is different to that which you will have seen presented through the Head of Finance during his presentation. The larger figure basically includes amounts which are currently being drawn down via external funding gateway and assurance processes that are administered either by central government or through the combined authority. So the figure that I'm presenting here is different to that in the medium-term financial strategy, basically because we only recognise amounts within that strategy and through the capital programme once they get to a certain stage of that assurance process, mainly when the funding agreement is actually signed and we get to a full business case or full business case plus stage for the process. So this slide is a diagram that basically provides you with background on the current governance arrangements for the capital portfolio. Here you can see that projects report into several programme board arrangements, which are then reporting into the council's committee process, which you'll all be familiar with, ultimately leading us up to council. You'll also see interfaces out with the council for projects which are externally funded through either government or the combined authority. These are required as external organisations hold that money as accountable body. So there's a further governance interface there that we need to adhere to. You'll also see internal project assurance bodies on this diagram, such as the Project Governance Group, which is down there as PGG, and the Delicate Contract Matters Board, which is down as DCM. And they're director level board structures that assist with the particularly difficult issues associated with major projects, mainly around contract management and procurement. And there's also other project assurance mechanisms, namely internal audit, and obviously yourselves as the scrutiny panels. We do also have some cross-border governance arrangements that you'll see on this diagram as well, mainly in the South East Calderdale regeneration programme, and they will govern externally funded initiatives, and mainly the very large A641 corridor programme, which is a cross-boundary programme which operates both in Calderdale and in Kirklees. So officers have been working quite closely actually with the audit committee for some months now to address some of the weaknesses that has been identified with project management following the internal audit. One of the recommendations that we've been taking forward is the requirement for changes in governance. This has come about mainly because of the almost exponential growth of the capital programme over the last few years. And obviously following successful acquisition of large funding streams like the Transport Fund money and Future High Street Fund and Transforming Cities Fund. And that's brought with it significant requirements for both coordination and interface management to ensure the work that's delivered without very serious negative disbenefits during the construction phase to the settlements in which those projects are actually occurring. So the next slide here, Chair, provides a very high level diagram of our future governance approach that we've been developing since our work with the audit committee, and that was developed earlier this year and is just being rolled out as we speak. You'll see that we've grouped projects into more coherent programmes now, which are based both on geographic location, but also operational themes like civil engineering, construction, regeneration, and so on. These programmes, once they're implemented in this form, will report to a coordinating portfolio board, and then into more simplified operational interfaces at quite a high level, a strategic level, allowing mainly more effective direct coordination and reporting to elected members, our external partners, and obviously enabling more senior managers to manage by exception, rather than as it is at the moment. It's quite an onerous process where senior officers are given quite a high level of detail. The other thing to highlight here is that we're working on a way of empowering officers at lower levels down the chain to make decisions within agreed tolerances on their own through programme boards without reference to chief officers, just to streamline the process and reduce the burden on more senior officers. There's a significant amount of work, I would say, just to embed these new arrangements. It's not going to happen overnight. It's probably going to be occurring over the next five months, and we'll obviously be able to report to you and how successful that's been once it's implemented. The implementation process did unfortunately run slightly behind schedule, and that was mainly because we had to take several months away from implementing this due to the requirement to bid for levelling up fund monies, which you'll see we were successful in acquiring for one of our projects. I've left this slide in, Chair, from a presentation that I gave previously to Place Scrutiny, again, just to highlight the assurance process that we undertake to acquire external funding. We've been quite successful as a borough in acquiring external funding over the last 5 years, and the portfolio and major projects actually grown from just under 13 million back in 2013 when I started here, and is now just under, in fact, just over now, £400 million. So it's grown significantly. Other services as well have acquired external funding in the same way through very similar processes. On this slide, you can see the 8 assurance activities that we undertake to get the capital money from West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and they're based on the Green Book, which is a business case methodology mandated by government, and also that's basically an amalgam of the Green Book with the Royal Institute of British Architects REBA process that they've implemented over there at the Combined Authority. Our role as officers is to work alongside our elected members to basically work very actively with the Combined Authority, really, to find and implement projects that not only satisfy the requirements, the very specific requirements of external funding, but also match and dovetail well with the priorities of the council, as we've stated, and the vision, clearly.
Thank you.
So the next slide here is just to give you an idea of some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment in terms of delivering the capital programme. Here, Chair, we've fleshed out some of the themes that we discussed in our briefing session that we had last with you. Some of these relate to the effect on the construction industry of external influences. Others are more structural and to do with the construction industry itself. The issues pretty much come together and provide significant external risk, really, to regeneration and civils projects, and they really do need to be actively managed, and that's our biggest challenge, really, at the moment. So construction really it's about managing risk, and we tend to get project success when we're able to deliver our schemes with the minimal number of risks crystallising, or where we're able to transfer risks to other parties who are better placed than we are to manage them. So starting with the most popular risk here, and probably one of the most famous ones in terms of what's in the media at the moment, which is inflation. And you do see it in the press quite a lot. The graph that you've got on this slide here has been produced by one of the tier 1 contractors called Mace. And it shows how material prices for construction have increased since the pandemic at a rate that's significantly higher than normal CPI inflation, which again is quite high since the pandemic began. Why is it a problem? Well, capital projects take a significant amount of time to develop, and they can take between about 2 and 5 years, sometimes more, depending on scale. So as prices increase, we find it more and more difficult to stay within our budgets, which may have been set some years previously. So obviously the pandemic particularly is an unusual event, which clearly we weren't expecting 2 or 3 years ago, and probably longer in case of some of the transport fund programs. So it's given us quite a difficult thing to manage within the contingency and the risk allowances that we've allowed within those projects. Also in construction, clients like us tend to try and transfer price risk over to contractors. When spikes in price like this occur, you start to see contractors go bump and go bust. That's happening quite a lot, as you've probably seen in the media. If that happens, it can cause big delays and larger costs for projects in delivery. By reducing the number of contractors as well, it also reduces the competitive tension in the construction market, and that makes it harder for us to find contractors to do the work for us in the future. And it also reduces the amount of leverage we've got in the market to get better prices. It's a very big problem. And there's mixed views in the construction press in terms of whether this is something which is temporary because the economy is starting up again after the pandemic, or whether it's here to stay. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next few months and so on. Labour price inflation is always also a key challenge. As the UK has come out of the European Union, we have experienced a reduction in available labour right across the UK, and quite a significant movement of labour between regions, as well as operatives, workers, consultants, and so on will chase high salaries offered where there's scarcity of labour resources. So that's increased demand on workers, and as a result, that's increased salary levels in pretty much all the construction trades. Current structure of the UK construction industry doesn't really help with this. The graph that you can see here is from an ONS survey, and that indicates really that between the years of 91 to now, 1991 to now, there's actually been a 13% increase in the UK construction workforce who are aged 45 or over. So it's an ageing workforce which isn't actually being particularly well replaced with younger recruits coming into trades or consultancy or other trades like architecture and civil engineering. So that's putting pressure on the system, and it's something which has been happening for quite some time. I'd recommend any members who are particularly interested in the structural issues to review the farmer review, which is quite a blunt title. It's called Modernise or Die, and I think that spells out pretty much the state of the construction industry at the moment. It covers many of the key activities that particularly tier one contractors, large clients like ourselves, and central government need to do to recruit, retain and train new workers in the industry and allow the industry itself to remain competitive, particularly to resist competition actually from abroad as well, particularly from China. So other challenges here. So the next one really to highlight here, and one we've experienced massively on the Northgate project over the last few years, is around supply chain. So we've suffered delays in acquiring materials which have been sitting slightly longer than normal at ports, and that's continuing, and it's obviously influenced by some of the things you'll have seen in the press around the shortage in HGV drivers. We attempt to mitigate that risk through pre-ordering of materials and getting them in slightly earlier where we can foresee this, but it is quite a challenge to know which ones will be in short supply at any one point in time, so it's not always possible to mitigate that risk. Supply chain elements, I would say, of major projects are incredibly complex. They're one of the largest supply chains that exist really in the economy, and this element of project management is becoming quite important as we move forward. So it's quite an interesting and quite an important skill set that we're training into officers now to be able to understand the supply chain that they're accessing through whichever tier of contractor that they are appointing. So next really on to recruitment. Recruitment in project management within the council has been a significant problem for some time, at least 6 years now. It reflects, again, as I've said, some of the demographics within the construction industry itself, but the main challenge we're having is competing with the private sector, the civil service, and other big clients to get skilled labour. So salaries alone in the private sector are quite eye-watering actually at the moment, even for the newest graduates compared to what are offered now within the council. So it's a big challenge for us. Private sector terms and conditions as well, which used to be particularly poor, have now improved massively. And that reflects some of the competition within the market to attract talent, but also recommendations from former reviews around construction from Egan, Latham and obviously Farmer as well. And tier one contractors and consultants, particularly project management consultancies, are reacting to those. And they're quite attractive now to staff, and particularly new graduates coming out of university. So as a result, we do struggle to compete, and And just to keep our heads above the water, what we've been doing is training up our own staff internally within the council. And that's been quite successful. And we can give you numerous examples of where we've retrained staff from other areas within the council, either from within our regeneration and strategy directorate, but also from areas like social care, where we've had people who fancied a career change and we've retrained them from that social care skill set to be project managers, either in civil engineering or construction. Now, the side benefit of this is that we've been able to attract quite a large team in major projects, which is actually over 75% female, and that compares quite favourably to the industry average, which is actually only 15% female. So that's a very good positive benefit that we've been able to achieve there. And the more successful we are, though, at attracting capital, the harder it becomes to fill the various positions. So it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, really, in that sense. So the better we are at attracting money in, the more difficult it becomes to find the right staff to do it. So that's a big challenge, really. The other issue is that the mainly capital funding that we have within major projects can't be used for things like training and development. So we have to be quite creative, really, in how we manage to train staff and develop them longer term. The other issue in terms of labour and recruitment and retention is the short-term nature of capital projects. We're unable to offer a very long tenure of employment, and as a result, that does tend to cause retention issues, because you can imagine there's a clear start, beginning and end to capital projects, and they are viewed like that by individuals coming into the council to deliver them.
Thank you.
So finally, just a few more challenges just to mention to you. Given the rather sporadic way in which external capital comes out of government, and usually it's a competitive process to acquire it, and we're competing against other local authorities mainly to acquire that money, we've struggled over the years to maintain a solid pipeline of activity. There's a long-term pipeline of activity, because from one moment to the next, we're not really sure where money's going to come from. We're hoping that devolution clearly will provide some of the solution to this, but what it does do is make workforce and operational planning very hard for us. So capacity planning, certainly in terms of staffing, is hard, but it also makes other things more difficult as well. As you've heard, it harms staff retention. Most external funding sources as well are what are called shovel-ready funding sources. So that basically means that the projects need to be fully designed, developed and de-risked in terms of land assembly and other abnormals, so that they can be delivered very quickly with a very short funding tail from central government. So developing projects to a shovel-ready standard takes significant revenue funding, and as members will be aware, that's in quite short supply within local government. Furthermore, the lack of a pipeline, I suppose, also reduces our leverage within the market. So the best way of developing good behaviours with suppliers is to be able to provide a long-term relationship. So if you can guarantee longer-term work, you're going to get far better behaviour from contractors, less predatory behaviour from contractors, and better quality. So because we have only short-term capital supplies, we're unable to guarantee that long-term work, and that does cause us a bit of a problem in managing our consultants and contractors. Linking our external capital to local priorities as well is difficult. So what we have to do when we're acquiring capital is to firstly deliver the outcomes of external funding. So each funding stream comes with a series of different outcomes that we have to achieve with it. And we also try and dovetail that in with the local priorities that we've set as a council. We're not always successful in doing that. Sometimes they don't gel particularly well together, but we do our best. So at the moment, obviously, you'll be aware that there's quite a lot of funding coming in for different purposes. Some is for towns, some is for new civil engineering works and infrastructure, and many of the outcomes that come out of that are things like journey time savings or gross value added, which are quite challenging to achieve. A lot of the money that we're getting in, particularly for Halifax, you'll be aware that there's quite a lot of money that's been coming forward for Halifax Town Centre recently via the combined authority. The reason why a lot of that's come our way at this point in time is because Halifax designated as a spatial priority area, a particular area of focus, if you will, within the regional strategic economic framework. And that's really useful for Halifax because obviously it gives us more oomph when we're bidding for external funding, because it's a priority area for the region and that fits in with some of their outputs. But what it does do is it makes it a little bit more challenging for us under this competitive bidding process to spread that money out wider to other areas within Calderdale. So that's a big challenge for us, really, because we're obviously competing for that external funding with other authorities. If we water down the outcomes that we are delivering, that makes us less competitive and less likely to receive that funding. So it's a big challenge for us, really, to sort of balance those two things out. Finally, Calderdale is keen to ensure our capital projects deliver social value. That's a really important part of what we do. And obviously, it's a key requirement of the Social Value Act as well. The challenge here is obviously we're in an inflationary market and it becomes more and more difficult to add the additional social value into our tendering and procurement process, because contractors are often having to take a bitter pill in terms of the price inflation or labour inflation that they're experiencing at the moment. So what it's needing from the council really is quite a creative approach from officers to be able to deliver quite significant social value right across Calderdale in line with these projects against that inflationary market. So I hope that's given you a reasonable impression of what we're up against at the moment. This is the last slide here, Chair, you'll be glad to know, and it just provides you a bit of an overview of some of the approaches that we're currently using for communication and consultation in some of our major projects. So Calderdale Next Chapter website, many of you will be familiar with that. That's our primary tool in terms of communication and keeping the public, elected members, external stakeholders, etc., up to date. We also work alongside the combined authority to reach a wider audience regionally through their Your Voice website that they use for consultation. We used that one most recently for the Station Gateway consultation, which has probably been one of the most successful consultations in terms of response that we've ever had actually at Calderdale. We have a regeneration brand, which is this Calderdale Next Chapter brand that you'll see around and about. And we also have a package of communications, which is externally funded through the various programmes we deliver. And that utilises various different forms of communication through the news. We have news media, we've got a regular newsletter that many of you will probably already be subscribed to. We're using bus backs, media advertising, letter drops, social media, and so on, just to get through messages as to what's happening, to allow people to contribute and communicate with us and be consulted on the projects that we're delivering as well. And that covers both members of the public, business and third sector.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks for that, Chair. I hope it was useful. Obviously, really keen to make this a regular thing if there's individual projects you'd like to scrutinise. But obviously, over to you, Chair, and happy to answer any questions that you've got.
Yeah, well, thanks for the list that you've sent through. I'm sure some of those will come up the scrutiny. I mean, we won't do it tonight, but it's useful to have that so we know where we are. I mean, you've got a difficult balancing act with resources there, haven't you? And trying to balance, I mean, particularly at the moment when projections are pretty uncertain and you can't really have any definitive assumptions on, because external forces like supply chains and things you've no control over. So it is difficult, I accept, to balance all that, which must make long-term planning very difficult. I mean, I'm sure other people have got questions, but to what extent is this programme driven by West Riding Combined Authority, and to what extent by the council? Because you mentioned earlier on about there'd be some weakness in audit or something by interfacing. Was it between the two of those? I might have misheard you. If it is a joint project, who manages it? Do the council do it, or does WICA do it?
So pretty much in terms of the capital programme, the way it's split, it's about an 80-20 split between what's council is the 20 and the rest is external funding. If it's an externally funded project that we deliver through the combined authority, Chair, they are the accountable body for the funding. We are the delivery body. for the funding. So the way in which it works is that we will provide a series of cases, business cases, at different stages of development as the scheme matures from a concept to a technically designed project ready to go, whether that's a building, a road, or a series of buildings, roads, and railway stations, or other things like that. So basically what the combined authority do is scrutinise our plan, the outcomes that we expect to deliver through that plan, and also things as detailed as the costings and so on. So it's quite a useful tool for us to have really as an assurance process, because we've got access to very competent consultants and very competent staff officers over there at the combined authority. And it's almost a second pair of eyes really to council officers to be able to scrutinise effectively what we're delivering. And what we're proving to the combined authority at those various assurance stages is, will the money that they are gifting us via the government deliver the outcomes that government want with that money? So the final stage really of assurance is what we call a full business case stage, and that's where they'll approve, they'll review our designs, they'll review our land assembly strategy, they'll review our tenders, and everything like that, so that it's all very clear. And then the council will be responsible as client for the delivery of that particular project. So you'll probably have seen the works that are just beginning at the Calder and Hebble junction. So that's been right the way through that assurance process, and we're just waiting now a few weeks now to release the final tranche of money from the combined authority, and then basically the authority then takes full responsibility for that scheme in terms of its delivery. So we'll manage the contractor, we'll manage the contract, and we'll manage any external risks that occur throughout that project.
Right, okay, thank you. I've got two hands up. I'll take Audrey, then I'll take Colin, if that's all right.
Chair, I think Colin was before me.
Oh, was it? Okay, sorry, Colin.
Sorry, and I think Paul's got a little pink hand up, which I think went up before me.
Mine seems to be hidden in the top corner there.
Yours blends into the background, Paul. My apologies for that. You fire off first then.
All right, thank you, Colin.
You're not running around the houses.
Thank you, Colin, Audrey. Yeah, I've got a few points, Rob, to be honest. One is you mentioned about the retention of staff as well, and when a lot of them realise that they've only got a contract for so long and they tend to find employment elsewhere, I think you'll find that they probably won't stay until the end of that contract, because they need to ensure that they actually can go from job to job without having any time that unpaid. Is there any caveats that can be in their contract to say that you have to stay until this project is complete? So then that way, at least we don't suffer then as an authority that, we run out of resources on whatever major projects are taking place. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other is, and I'm going to be sort of like contradicting myself here a little bit, and that is to ensure that we actually see some of the capital project money spent within the wards that don't have town boards. We tend to see a lot of money get spent in places like Brighouse and Elland and Sowerby Bridge, and there's no equality there in other areas of Calderdale that don't have these town boards. So do we have any money that from these capital spend that can go into projects within the wards as well? And then my contradictory point on this is that we're saying at the end of the day that the cost of materials and things like that is actually going up. Can we at some point turn around and say, should we put a stop on capital projects until the markets may improve? And then that way we're not getting ourselves into a position where with so many major capital projects on the go that could potentially cost us millions of pounds due to increase of inflation or building materials. So they're my sort of like major points there, Rob.
Thank you, Councillor Bellinger. So I'll take them in order if that's all right, Chair.
Yes,
so in terms of retention of staff, unfortunately, there isn't anything that we can put in a contract that would force somebody to stay to the end of a project. The staff that we recruit to oversee our projects generally will be council officers, so they would be under the council standard terms and conditions. So when they leave, they give a notice period and we have to replace them. For some projects where we've struggled to recruit, we can bring in external consultants. And in that case, then they would definitely stay until the end because they'd be under contract. But it's basically as simple as that. It is our preference to use council officers to oversee our schemes, mainly because we get far better value for money through the officers. So obviously we're not paying as much. I mean, a consultant will probably cost 3 times what an officer will cost. Obviously they're an external organisation and we oversee them via contract if they're an external contractor, whereas if they're a staff member, we can bring them and manage them as actual staff and officers, and that does work a little bit better for us. So unfortunately not. If only there was, it would make my life easier, but unfortunately that's not the case. In terms of spreading the capital out in the wards, I think I'll probably go back to the discussion in the presentation really about outputs and specific external funding outputs. Now, what we do try and do is do our best to spread the capital out as widely as we possibly can. But unfortunately, mainly because most of the capital that we have comes through the combined authority, which is linked to specific outputs and outcome requirements that come from central government and are then distilled through the regional plan. There's often limits to what we can do in that regard. So some of our schemes, for example, our phase 4 A629 corridor programme go through multiple areas of the town. So that scheme comes all the way from mainly top through Elland and finishes off at the train station in Halifax. So we've been able to spread out that resource all the way down that whole corridor, providing active travel, cycling, walking and improved bus facilities using that programme. So that's the way in which we've tried to do that. But again, that's had to be in line with a wider transport fund programme, which is based on benefit cost ratio. And that's a technical term that they use to assess whether we get, how much for £1 in do you get £2 out, or for £1 in do you get £3 out. And they use a very complicated and quite impenetrable way of assessing benefit cost ratio. It's quite a fine art for consultants and combined authority officers. But one of the big things that helps with benefit cost ratio is journey time savings on the highway. So if it's a transport fund focused project, then a journey time saving can give you a very high benefit cost ratio. Now that assessment framework is changing, and is changing at the moment because the combined authority is changing its priorities since the climate emergency and so on to focus on other issues, mainly active travel, biodiversity and climate change impacts. So we're hoping that change may well give us the opportunity to spread the money out a little bit wider for less black and white journey time saving outcomes. So in terms of the final point that you made around material price inflation, this is where the assurance process that we undertake externally comes in. So the final assurance process for our externally funded schemes is a point called Full Business Case Plus. And the plus basically is an assessment of our full business case, but also our tender returns that we get from the market. So it's at that point that the combined authority will see whether or not we can deliver the project within the financial envelope that we've got. So if we were to come back to them at that stage and it was significantly over the budget that we've been allocated, then there'd be a decision to make then as to whether to move forward with the project or not. For schemes that are developed by the council itself, either through prudential borrowing or other means, that same process applies. So the ultimate business case, for example, would go through to Cabinet and then through to council. And if it was not financially viable at that point, then members would be able to say yes or no to the delivery of that scheme.
Thanks, Rob. I was surprised to hear you say that consultants are only 3 times as expensive as staff. Are you sure it's only 3 times as expensive as staff? I've seen some mouth-watering numbers for consultants.
It can be more sometimes, councillor, but yeah, I think we try and drive the price down as much as we possibly can to get value for money for the taxpayer.
I was going to say, we're either overpaying our officers or we're getting cheap consultants. Yeah, all right. I think, Colin, you're next. I've got a few people queuing up now. I think Colin's next, then Audrey, please.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, it sounds as if you've doing some really good work in terms of internal recruitment and development of officers. But I wondered, given the, as you said, the fragility of the jobs that's there for specific projects, whether there's any scope for working alongside other West Yorkshire authorities to actually have a larger pool of staff, a larger number of projects on the go that could then lead to greater security of employment for people with these skills. The other question I had was, given the inflationary environment now, how much of a problem is value engineering? So that, I mean, hearing what was going on with the Grenfell Tower refurbishment, how there was a price envelope and that contractors came in under cost to get the contracts and then cut back on the quality of the work that they were doing, the materials they were using, to actually end up being able to come away with a profit. How much of an issue are you finding that at the moment, and how do you actually resolve that?
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. So I'll take the first point around internal recruitment. You're absolutely right. That's a key way in which we can try and mitigate this issue of lack of staff coming through. We have in the past worked quite closely with the Combined Authority. They are a larger tier authority, obviously, than Calderdale, and have a bit more oomph in terms of the recruitment market. So previously we've done recruitments with them, so they've recruited staff and then they've been transferred to Calderdale to assist. You may have met some of those officers. Actually, they're mainly working in the strategic infrastructure area of regeneration and strategy. So that's absolutely the way forward. We've had further conversations actually last month with senior officers from other authorities within West Yorkshire, and they're very keen to work collaboratively, because this isn't just an issue which affects Calderdale, it does affect all the other West Yorkshire authorities as well. So potentially we may well work with them to develop a pool of staff that we can move about, but that's very much in its early phases at the moment. In terms of value engineering, you're absolutely right, it can be a problem, but mainly around design and build type projects where we give design and construction responsibility to a contractor or a contractor and alongside an architect. The key way of combating that particular issue is around our contract management and the early stages of the project. So adequate specification of materials, proper design and so on are key elements of this. Finally, during the construction phase, the council will use a clerk of works to ensure the work has been carried out effectively. So you'll see this, Northgate House is a great example of this. So when each package of work is complete, we have a clerk of works who will go through alongside obviously our building control colleagues who are very, very heavily involved in this, and make sure that the work is being delivered as specified and meets the relevant standards in terms of building control, and usually exceeds those standards, particularly for a council building as well. So we normally exceed most of the standards as well for schools in particular, where we do new construction or refurbishment.
Thank you. I'll take Audrey, then Mohammed, please.
Thank you. Yeah, really, really interesting. It's always interesting to hear about all the different aspects of this. My question is about, we talk about the escalation, and inflation in the cost of materials. So when it's a WICA funded project and they've agreed it, do they agree then to take on the inflationary aspect of it as well, or is the project reduced? And then I've got just another question around priorities. Who sets the priorities for the capital programme? Because I know that Mixenden has long waited on its hub, and if we are sort of at a time when resources are going through the roof, and we want to to get that done sort of as near to budget as possible. And I know that's not a WICA funded project. It would be interested to know how that's being managed, I suppose, to make sure that we don't have to cut back any more on it. I know it's been cut back slightly already. And I've got one other question: storage on pre-orders. How would we do that? Have we got capacity to store all the materials that we would be pre-ordering? Because that would have a cost as well, or maybe not. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So in terms of the inflation risk on projects in general, for externally funded schemes that we work with the Combined Authority to deliver, they have a significant contingency allowance that they apply to these schemes. That's called Quantified Risk Allowance, basically QRA. And basically it's You'll have heard terms like optimism bias and so on, which are bandied around in terms of developing capital projects. But what happens at the start of a scheme is that they will work with us to develop a scheme, and we will come up with costings all the way through the development process. But they'll apply a percentage on top of that called optimism bias, where they add some money in just in case we're being a bit too optimistic, and that's based on government set percentages and experience right the way across the UK. Now, gradually, as the project becomes more developed, the costings can become far more accurate, and we replace at the full business case stage our QRA with basically a risk pot that we will hold, a contingency amount that we will hold to cope with anything that will happen unusually, unexpected things that we find under the ground, or price hikes and things like that. So we do hold a pot of money for that. There's also a more centrally held general QRA pot that the Combined Authority hold themselves that we can bid into should the worst happen. What we try and do, and there's an example of this I can give you, Councillor, for the Phase 1B scheme at Calder and Hebble, where just before we got to full business case stage, we identified a number of risks which we'd had held on our risk register for some time, but looked that they were far off in the distance and quite a low probability of actually occurring. Now, just before full business case stage came through, we did notice that the priority, so the probability of those risks occurring and the impact had increased. So what we did at that point was we asked for the money associated with those risks to be provided to the council up front, and actually asked for slightly more money for that project from the Combined Authority than we were originally planning to ask for. That was granted through this QRA pot at the Combined Authority, because they understood that we were proactively trying to manage that risk. So effectively, that's how the process works. After we get through full business case stage, obviously other projects within the West Yorkshire area will be accessing QRA money. So there is a risk that they could run out, and we have to think a bit creatively about how we manage financial risks which do come about. But that hasn't actually happened as yet in terms of the programme, and there is significant money there available should the worst happen. So yeah, that's the one on in terms of inflation. So in terms of priorities for externally funded schemes, each little tranche of external funding will have specific priorities or outcome requirements associated with it, and those are the ones that we have to achieve. For internal schemes like the one you mentioned, Councillor, at Mixenden, obviously that's using council resources to deliver that particular project. So that reflects the priorities of the council. The scheme budget is based on a set business case and the repayment of prudential borrowing, which is funding the scheme. The prudential borrowing is funded through rent repayment, mainly through the doctor's surgery, which is going to be occupying that site, and other units on the site as well. So the change in business case reflects really the ability to pay prudential borrowing monies back. So each project that we deliver ourselves as a council has a business case that we have to adhere to, and that's what sets the parameters really as to what we can deliver, the scale of the budget and the scale of the intervention. So the final point that you raised, Councillor, was around storage of materials. You're absolutely right, storage does cost money. Sometimes we might have to pay extra to a particular contractor and they will store the materials themselves at their own site. On other occasions, we can use our own facilities and depots to store materials. So a good example for you is the paving stones that you'll see in the new courtyard at Northgate House. We ordered those early because there was a challenge to actually get hold of that stone from Marshalls. So we did order them early. We stored them on council premises, and then they were available to move onto the Northgate site when we needed them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob, for that. Mohammed.
Yeah, just something I was able to, some information I gained in the previous meeting that we had. So from my understanding, the money is given for a specific purpose from external bodies, and obviously the council uses this money for a specific purpose. And that money is used for that specific purpose, i.e., if it's earmarked for a certain deprived area, the majority of the money is used for that particular area. Are there enough checks and balances? I think there are, from what you said so far, Rob, that that money is not used somewhere else. Because historically this has happened, and it has meant that the money that was given for a specific project hasn't been fully used for that purpose.
Understood.
That's my question, Rob.
Right. So in terms of the external funding, for all the schemes that we deliver, the large significant schemes that we deliver for the combined authority, we're required to identify the outcomes that we intend to achieve right at the very early stage of the project, and they're refined all the way through. So, for example, the phase 1B scheme that you'll see at the Calderdale junction, that one's based on an outcome which is mainly around reduced journey times between Ainley Top and Halifax town centre, and a few other outcomes as well around bus provision and so on. Now, what we're required to do to prove we've achieved the outcomes that we stated in our full business case is actually place a defined benefits realisation process, which we describe in our business case and then implement after the project is complete. So it's called the monitoring and evaluation phase, an M&E phase. And we agree with the combined authority what that will look like, how they'll measure the results. So if it's journey time savings, they've got lots of different methodologies for measuring the speed of vehicles and the time it takes for them to move down the corridor. So once the project is complete, at an agreed time, we'll work collaboratively with the combined authority to see that those outcomes have been achieved in the areas where they have been specified. So it's pretty much, it sounds really simple. It's quite a complicated thing to do and get agreed with the combined authority, because as you'll be aware, there's multiple ways of measuring different outcomes, but we come together with them to decide which is the appropriate way to measure success, and then we ensure that success is measured at a later point in time.
Thank you for that, Rob.
That's right. Sheila, did you want to say something? I'm going to ask Steph first, but do you want to wrap up when Stephanie's had a question? Is that
That's
right?
fine, Chair, thank you.
I know your hand was up and it's gone again. Have you you don't have to speak if you don't want to. Steph, do you want to put your question forward?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. This is about priorities given to external funding, really, against council funded, very much like the Mixenden Hub, which has been a problem for many years. And I'm thinking about the length of time that it takes from the original idea to start to present a business case and the actual build start. How long should that take? I certainly know that, say, Northgate House, that was done very, very quickly, but of course funded externally as well. And yet, say, Mixenden Hub has been going for as long as I know, and it's still not built. It's still not even started. And of course, during that time, inflation has happened, COVID has happened, construction is having difficulties getting supplies and builders, and the longer you leave it, the more expensive it becomes. So why does it take so long from original to final?
Thank you, Councillor. So there's a complicated answer to this one. I think what I would say is for each individual project we deliver, they're all very substantially different. So the outcomes are different, the scale of which are different, the way in which they're funded is different, and the way in which we address abnormal costs, things like land assembly and so on, are also very different, and that can have a significant effect on in terms of how long they take to deliver. The example you gave around Northgate House, for example, that was a building obviously that the council already owned, and
as is Mixenden Hub.
So Mixenden was slightly different in that the land took some time to assemble. That was all in private ownership before we brought it under our ownership, and we weren't able to use CPO effectively there, whereas on other schemes we've got a good strategic case to be able to get approval to use our CPO powers. So they're all very substantially different, really. The other thing to say was on the...
I'm sorry, can I just stop you there?
Yes.
As a councillor that cares about Mixenden Hub, and I know this is going into real detail, but I think we should know about these things. I didn't know it was compulsory purchase order of that land. I always assumed it was council land, because other things had been built on there, but that did belong to the council, I understand, previously. So the business case, do councillors ever get to see the business case? Do we ever see the reasons behind things? That's how I feel like I don't get to know.
Steph, can I just say, I mean, this Mixenden Hub's been going on for quite some time.
Yeah,
from what I understand about it, we had to buy the Jumbo's pub and a whole lot of other things. There were a lot of negotiations with land, and people didn't want to play ball, and some of the prices they were asking for this land were pretty steep. So, you know, I mean, I'm sure Rob can deal with it, but it's a project that's been going on for quite some time. And it also involves the NHS, of course, with because it doesn't work without what they want to do. So it isn't really just the council that's involved here. There's lots and lots of other different bodies as well. I'm sure Rob can deal with that, but I'm just making the point that it's not been that simple.
Happy to pick that up.
I understand that, and I don't want to get into the minutiae. I'm just saying that I feel as though I'm not.
I'm happy to address it, Councillor Clark, if required. I think obviously Councillor Caffrey will be aware of this one for his time as our portfolio holder some years ago, I think, or CAFM portfolio holder at the time, some time ago. But yeah, this one has been quite a big challenge. So we, in terms of Mixenden Hub, what we had to do, and regeneration like this is pretty much like building a house of cards sometimes, because of the challenges of finding money and making things, particularly prudential borrowing, financially viable. So in terms of the Mixenden Hub, we had to assemble the land. We weren't able to use CPO there. We had to do it through a voluntary means. So there were multiple different landowners. One, I remember at the time, was actually living overseas in Pakistan at the time. So it took some tracking down to be able to acquire that plot. Then in addition to that, we had to be able to demolish the existing properties that were on there, and that took some time because they were in different multiple ownerships as well. So there was a lot of work that went into doing that. Now, the final stage, which was probably the biggest challenge, as Councillor Caffrey said, was the actual acquisition of the tenant. So the doctor's surgery, as you'll be aware, is up at the Mixenden Stones surgery, and we're also moving the pharmacy from there as well. So we had to make sure that we'd done an agreement, a leasing agreement, and agreed heads of terms with them to occupy the actual doctor's surgery element of that. Now, the rental paid by those two developments, alongside other things, pays for the prudential borrowing, and that's how we formed the business case. So the reason it took so long is because we were building that whole house of cards to make the project viable, so that when it came to members for approval, and it did come some time ago, Councillor Clark, you may not have seen it come through. There is a council cabinet report which we can provide to you to show you how the business case is made up and some of the background behind the project. But basically, that's we produce the business case. So we build that house of cards, then we produce a cabinet report for members to see whether that's an investment that they are able to make with the council's funds, and then we move forward with it. So what takes further time after that's been completed is getting the design done, moving it through planning. And the biggest challenge we've got with Mixendon, unfortunately, is finding a contractor to do it. That's what's happening right now. So that it's out to tender at the moment, and we're trying to find a contractor who can, within the budget that we've got, can deliver that for us.
But we've got one.
Not as yet. No, it's still a tender process at the moment. That finishes in just under 3 weeks' time. And if we find a contractor at that point, which I'm quite confident we will, because we've got a good scheme in a good area, we'll be able to start in early December on site, and you'll start to see that happen.
Thank you very much. I didn't want to sort of spend a lot of time on that, but it's just something. Can I also talk about projects? A sort of the southeast Calderdale, the town, the Upper Valley. What about North Halifax, other than Mixendon Hub? Are there any?
Yes, Councillor, there are projects. You'll be aware the Transforming Cities Fund is
Yes,
investing some funding up there. But again, it comes back
that's
to
about the road and the walking. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, but again, it comes back to one of the challenges that I outlined in the presentation, which is obviously Halifax Town Centre is a spatial priority area, which makes it very easy for us to bring in that external funding. The trick is how to move that funding outside of those spatial priority areas. I know members are quite keen to work. Now we've got devolution monies through at the combined authority, and officers are very keen to see that money pushed out of those market town areas to other areas like North Halifax as well. So that's the big effort that we've got over the next few months, really, to see how we can do that and how we might be able to move away from the model that we've been using with the combined authority for some time, which pretty much limits spatially where we can make those investments. It's an excellent point, and you're absolutely right. There should be some spread of that money into other areas which haven't benefited so far from it, and that's what we're keen to do.
Excellent.
thank you.
I'm gonna give Rob a rest
Thank you,
now.
Chair.
That's all right, because he's dealt with all those questions very well. I think he deserves a bit of time off. Can we move on to Sheila, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sheila O'Neill, Director of Regeneration and Strategy. I've got a terrible cold, so you'll have to bear with me, and I'll be very quick. I just wanted to pick up briefly on a point that Councillor Bellinger made about staff and staff retention. And part of the reason that people work for local authorities, as all of you will know, is that they're drawn to working in the communities and doing good for people in the places that they work in. My ambition is that we're an employer of choice, and that this is somewhere where people want to come and work. And I have to say, Rob, as leader of the major projects team, has done a tremendous job of people actually wanting to go and be part of that team. So I think that's a really important element of people wanting to work with us collectively as Calderdale. And that's something that we're really keen to promote. There are benefits to working in every organisation, and we want to make sure that our benefits are really clear to people. The other thing is the point that Councillor Clark's just made, actually, that chimes with what Councillor Bellinger said at the start about the focus on particular priority areas. The combined authority, as it's evolving and changing, it was very much about exploiting growth through the government funds that were available. There's a much stronger agenda, as you'll all be aware, around levelling up now and addressing need and being much more inclusive. So there are new policies in development through the combined authority that we're all contributing to around equality, diversity and inclusion. So whilst some of the funds are targeted and ring-fenced to specific areas, we still need to make sure that people that live in the communities across the borough are able to benefit. So it may be through the transport links that Rob's described, but connection to employment, about improved housing offer and so on. So it's just because the money is targeted to a particular area doesn't mean that it shouldn't benefit the wider community and have other effects. And I think that whole agenda around bringing investment is something that the Calderdale Next Chapter website explains quite well, actually. I think the story's told very well there. I think they're the main points I wanted to make, really, was around that equality and inclusion agenda that is growing and very much supported by the Mayor. So I think that really helps when we start talking about North Halifax and the investment in communities like that, where you don't have that special priority area that Rob's talked about.
Thank you, Sheila. Hope you're
Thanks,
feeling better tomorrow.
Me too. Thank you.
Dave, did you have your hand up earlier on, or did you check it down again? Are you there? Dave Young. No. Has anybody else got any questions, please?
I'd just like to say well done to Rob for this evening. It was done extremely well, answering all those questions that were put to him. And for the work that he does, yeah. Thanks
for that, Paul. You saved me doing it. I was about to do the same thing. Yeah, thanks, Rob. You did out a lot of the questions there, and we're quite in detail and in depth, and it's a bit of a challenging area, this, isn't it? And I mean, we can't, he's balancing things. It's difficult to balance. So yeah, keep up the work. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
If nobody's got anything else, I'll just say thanks very much, and we'll move on to the work programme if that's okay. Do you want to lead this, Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make 2 points. We've moved, we were going to talk about the waste to recycling contracts. This month we moved that back to next month because Andrew Pitts is away at the moment, and he's the key person for this. What I'd like to ask the board is whether they'd be happy to move the transport and impact of COVID-19 back to one of the meetings in January or February. The reason I say that is that we haven't got in my opinion, we haven't got sufficient preparatory work done for that item, and we want to involve partner organisations, including transport providers. And I wouldn't want it to be a sort of not a properly prepared item. So given that we've added another meeting to the December agenda, I'd like to suggest that you move that one back to January or February, and Fazana and myself will work with Stephen Lee and Sheila and colleagues to make sure that's well prepared.
Well, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, in fact, the waste recycling contract would be quite a detailed, long one, isn't it? So could the transport one. So it's probably better to split them if everybody's happy with that. Is everybody okay for it to move it to January?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, well, yeah, that's fine then, Mike. It's quite a full programme, 9th of December, isn't it? Anybody got anything else they want to add on to this list at all, or change anything? Oh, yeah, okay. Audrey, sorry, Audrey, you got your hand up.
It was just to ask about the housing report that went to Cabinet. We were going to have Heidi Wilson along, but she was on holiday, so that was moved. And I noticed in the work plan it says housing, a review of the housing scrutiny that we did a few years ago. 2 years ago. But that was the same thing. We were going to look at the housing report that was sent to Cabinet, weren't we?
I think, Chair, that should be included. Heidi Waters is expecting to come for both items in December, but currently is in the O2 in London for an awards ceremony. So that's a good excuse not to be here, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll let her off on that one. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, we'll bear that in mind, because that was it about 2 years ago, that Audrey social housing review paper.
Yeah.
So we both worked on it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, okay, that we'll sort that out. Anything else pressing at the moment, or is everybody Regan?
Thanks, Chair. Couple of things that have been flagging up for me of late, which I wonder if the board might be interested in looking at, is trying to find out what's going on at planning, and also Safer, Cleaner, Greener with regards to the, I mean, it's the end of the season now, but whether they've had a chance to reflect and consider plans of action, for example, with the, particularly with the mowing that's not been done for goodness knows how long, especially in the gateway areas into the borough, which I think reflects badly on us. Don't know if that might be something that the board might be wanting to consider.
We usually have a Safer, Greener review, don't we? Have we this year? I don't think we have we? We could do a general review of Safer, Greener if everyone's okay with that. I mean, it's a big subject and affects a lot of people. Excuse me. We could do a general and include that in it. Is everybody all right with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Thought you would, Paul, wouldn't you? Yeah. Yeah. And what was the other one? Planning. Yeah, well, I think planning's become a bit contentious, hasn't it? So it might be something we should be looking at. I mean, we don't want to be having another Ombudsman report on planning, do we? So
that's true. I mean, the specifics of it are that, and I do have my own agenda here because I'm slowly working an application of my own through the system. But it's what I'm finding is that we seem to be falling down, and I'm wondering if we could have a little bit of a forensic review on why we're falling down and what can be done to improve matters.
I think you're right. I think we've all got planning cases that are behind. So I'm relaxed about that. Everybody else happy with putting planning on the agenda?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things I wanted to raise about planning as well, Chair, which has just reminded me now, apparently planning have taken on a company called TerraQuest to deal with all the new applications that's coming in. And what I've actually found is TerraQuest are dealing with the applications and getting them through before some of the applications that's in the backlog. So what we're finding, people putting an application in the past couple of months and they're getting approved, whereas people that have put them in the past are still waiting. That's having a knock-on effect then on the local building trade, because all the new ones that's getting through are snapping up all the building trade. So those that are waiting so long are going to have to wait again for builders to come free. So I think we've got a little bit of an issue there that might come back and bite us in the backside as an authority.
Well, I'm not aware of that, Paul. So you're telling me something I don't know. I don't dispute what you're saying, but Mike, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so I'll have a conversation. I'm sure she won't mind with Sheila and Richard to spec an item for early in the new year.
I think we do need to address it because it's becoming a bit of a problem at the moment. Okay, well let's get that on. When can we get that on? Because that's fairly urgent, isn't it? We're not going to get it on in. Let's have a look. Have we got time in January, Mike, on that one?
I've just lost my. Yes, we have, depending on where we get to with the planning of the transport item. But yes, we have it in January.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this save our shops as well. That could be deferred again, couldn't it? That could be keep it deferred.
I think that's likely to be deferred. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one less item. So let's try and get it on in January if we can.
Okay.
Is that all right, everybody? Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Anything else, or is that enough for now? Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Interesting meeting.